All right. Good morning, everybody. I'm Andrew Rodland, also known as Hobbs on the internets. This is Fatpack It. As it says, full-featured Perl apps in a single file. If you're having any trouble seeing the slides, or if you want to follow along or look at it afterwards, you can find the slides cleverdomain.org/YE2018. So it says full-featured Perl app in a single file. What does that mean? Why do you want to do that? Well, for one thing, it means that we can run on a whole bunch of different machines without too much effort. Most Unix machines that you find out there will have Perl already installed. Some version, not necessarily the newest version, but you're going to have a Perl there. And it means that people can run our app and contribute to our app without really having to care too much about Perl. So you can use this for general purpose utilities. You want to have a thing. You created the next Docker or whatever it is, and you put it out on the internet, and you want to make sure that everybody can run it. Or you have a workplace where not necessarily Perl hostile, but they don't use Perl. They're not used to Perl. They don't have the machinery for deploying and building Perl apps and installing all the dependencies and pinning versions and all of that stuff. We might be here at the conference because we care about Perl, but really the world is full of people who they don't care. They're not interested in what language something is written in. They just want to be able to use it. I'm not saying sneak Perl in under people's noses, but make it so that they don't have to think about Perl stuff. So in short, make Perl a seamless thing for end users and for admins who have to deal with your stuff. Sometime back around the year 2000, if you found a Perl script on the internet and you wanted to run it, this is what you would do. Download it, run Perl whatever. You get one of these, pretty much guaranteed. So you open up the CPAN shell. It's going to ask you a bunch of configuration questions. You're going to have to set some stuff that it's not even going to ask you about until like the year 2012 or something like that to be able to install stuff as a non-root user. Install the module that it told you you're missing. Wait a while for some stuff to install. Run the script again. It's going to give you another error. You're going to do it over again. Or people are just going to write code that has no dependencies outside of the Perl core. Lots of people do this. It makes me sad. So things have happened since the year 2000 to improve that. Locallib is a big one. Made it very much easier for people to install and use modules as non-root users. CPAN minus eased the pain of configuration and made things quite a bit faster just to install the modules that you need. The practice of bundling an application as a module distribution also made things easier because if you have a distribution, you have a makefile PL, you can declare your dependencies, you can say cPanm install deps, or cPanm the module itself off of CPAN, or download the thing, do cPanm install deps, let it install everything that your module needs, and that makes things easier as well. But there is even more that we can do. Things have moved on since that, but some of this stuff is not really quite as well known. One of them is Fatpack. Perl has had for quite some time @inc hooks. You can have something other than a directory name in @inc. It can be a piece of code or an object that gets called when a module needs to be loaded, and it just has to provide the module source. It doesn't have to come from the disk. For example, you could put a hash in main that is just full of module text. And so app FatPacker is a module that will do exactly that for you. It will find all of the modules that your program uses and collect all of their source together into a gigantic collection of here docs and instantiate a hash in the main package, and then cat that together with your script and write it all out for you so that you have one file that contains your program and all of the modules that it uses. This only works for for pure Perl modules, it's just a bunch of Perl source all in one file. There is also PAR, which is a different approach, actually older than Fatpack, inspired by Java jar files. PAR does support XS to some extent. It also has an executable creator for creating native binaries for Windows, Mac, Linux, etc. It's kind of quirky, by which I mean I've had problems with it. People have had problems with it, with the tracer not always finding the modules that are needed or getting really strange errors at runtime. It's caused some issues for some people. This is not actually a talk about PAR, but it's a thing to be aware of. So Fatpack is pure Perl friendly. It's not XS friendly. So going on from that, you really want to talk about Moo. Moo is an extremely useful subset of MooX. It's basically MooX without the meta object stuff, or MooX without the antlers, or slightly less than 2/3 of MooX. But what Moo is, it's very fast in terms of load time, execution time, etc. It has no mandatory XS dependencies. It can use it if it's available to speed things up a little bit, but it will work 100% pure Perl. And it automatically upgrades and interoperates with MooX. If you do, in fact, have MooX in your program and you try to look at a Moo module as if it was a MooX module and do meta things to it, it will magically work. There is a pretty substantial ecosystem of Moo using modules out there these days. And it's recommended for the use of module authors in my book. And the reason for that is if you're a module author and you want to be able to do MooXy things, but you don't necessarily want to put the burden on your downstream users of having MooX as a dependency, then you can leave that choice up to them. If they would like to use MooX, then it will be completely compatible. If they don't want to use MooX, if they don't want to have MooX as a dependency, that's absolutely fine. Your module will go on using Moo. And so it's a way to leave the choice up to your users. So basically, if you don't need meta stuff in MooX, it makes more sense to create a module that has Moo as a dependency than MooX. So given this, given Fatpack, given Moo, now you've got your toolkit where you can create some, pretty substantial object-oriented kind of code and pack it into a single file for distribution. If you have a pretty substantial application, you probably need some way to structure it and maybe handle some command line arguments. So there's a thing on CPAN called MUX Options. It's like MooX getopt, except it is the Moo version of it. And you would think because of that, it's going to be pure Perl supporting. Actually, no. It turns out that MUX Options wants to format help text nicely. It wants to do line wrapping. It wants to line wrap correctly, even if you're using Chinese, Japanese, etc., which requires the ICU Unicode library, which requires XS. There's no pure Perl alternative to that. So if you want to use MUX Options, no, you can't Fatpack. So because of that, I had an application. I wanted MUX Options. I also wanted to change a couple other things about it. So I wrote my own alternative to MUX Options, which is called CLI Osprey. This is an example of how it's used. Supports 99% of what MUX Options does, and then some other stuff. It should look reasonably familiar if you've ever used MUX Options, MooX getopt, anything like any sort of declarative getopt thing. If you declare an option that is an attribute on your object that will get instantiated from command line, you can use anything that attributes can do, as well as a couple other things. You can provide documentation, etc. And then you just call new with options rather than new, and that will instantiate your thing from the command line. So you run this program here. That's our hello world, has a greeting. Run it. It will use the default that's provided in the attribute. Run it with an option. Yo, world. Run it with --man. It'll do that for you. automatically generated documentation that you can customize through class attributes and option attributes. It also has the abilities of appcmd, which let you write programs that are, you know, my command, my subcommand, -- options, and so you can have a fully structured program in that way. So in this case, this program has 2 subcommands. You can have options. If you put option attributes on the main program, then they're supported globally. If you put option attributes on subcommands, they're supported within that subcommand, and they're, you know, everything is done properly there. The subcommand receives an already created instance of the parent command. You can nest as deeply as you like if you want to have, you know, this, that, the other. If anybody's used the Google Cloud API command line, they go like 4 deep. If you want to do that, it's up to you. And you have all of MooX type stuff available to you, which means that you can use types to validate your arguments, and the user will get a sensible message if they pass something that, you know, you're supposed to pass a port range and you gave me the letter Q. You can give them a sensible error for that. You can use builders or build args, etc., to turn what was passed in on the command line into useful data for your program, and then just access it the way that it should be throughout. You can use method modifiers. Basically, you can do some really powerful stuff without writing a large amount of code. So you got all of that. Now you've got real power in your hands in a single file. How do we simplify the build and distribution process? So something I want to tell you about quickly, if you're not familiar with it, is CPAN file, which is a format. It's like Makefile.pl, but it's not for modules. It's specifically for things that are distributed as applications. It's a declarative type thing where you can specify all of your dependencies. You can have test dependencies. You can have build dependencies. You can have optional dependencies. You can have whatever things suit you. It's not about how to build and install a module. It's specifically about what Perl modules do I need to run this thing. It has a specification, which is on CPAN, and it has an implementation, which is module CPAN file, which is used by CPAN- and CPM. Speaking of CPM, it's a CPAN client. You might not be familiar with it. It is a CPAN client based on similar backend to CPAN-. It supports parallel installation, which means it will go and fetch modules in parallel for you and build them in parallel. It supports the new static install standard, which is for modules that don't require actually any real building. The majority of modules just have a makefile.pl, which is copy these files to where they belong. If that's all that you need to do, then you can mark a module as static install, and a client that supports that will just copy the files, and it won't actually run a Perl, and it won't run Makefile.pl, and it'll save you a lot of time, which means it is fast. And it is distributed as a Git repo with CPM, the binary, as a Fatpack binary in its own Git repo. All you have to do is pull it, and you always have the latest version, which means that if your thing is a Git module, you can add CPM as a Git submodule, and then if you do Git submodule update, then this is all that you need to do to install all of the dependencies. If you've done that and you've written a CPAN file, this is all you need to do to install all of your dependencies, is just check out Git submodule update, run Perl CPM install, and all of your stuff is there. And that's really pretty awesome. Like, really pretty awesome. Hang on. So everybody knows, like, Catalyst, right? It's got all the dependencies in the world, right? It takes forever to install. This is CPM install Catalyst runtime. Moose took a second there. Okay, we're done. Not bad. Oops, I gotta unfull screen that. So yeah, CPM will make your life easier. Now you don't need to assume that the user even has a CPAN client. If you're building a Fatpack thing, there's certain things that you want to do when you are doing the Fatpack Trace, which is how it collects all of the dependencies for your app. You want to make sure that you are using the pure Perl versions of all of the modules, even though you likely have, as a developer, the XS versions of them on your system. In theory, the first one there, pure Perl only equals 1, would work for everything on the planet. We don't live in that ideal world. Here's a collection of other ones that I can recommend for you to force various modules that are out there that are either pure Perl or XS into their pure Perl flavors, so that when you build, you will bundle the pure Perl version with it, and they will be in the Fatpack for your users to use. There's also an issue with certain modules that are pure Perl or XS, which is that they install their pure Perl version source into the architecture-specific directory of @inc, which means that when Fatpack goes and finds it, it puts it in a path that is the architecture-specific directory, and then when the user runs it on a different architecture, it doesn't look in that directory, and so sub-identify not found. I'm working on actually upstreaming a improvement to app FatPacker to help avoid that, but it didn't get done in time for this talk, but look for it soon. If you're working on something like this, before I get done with that, you have to do a little bit of trickery if you use one of those modules to actually effectively place it in the right place. Just find those Perl files and copy them out of Arch into the right directory. So putting it all together, this is, other than comments, exactly what I use in some real-life code that I have on the internet, that I have at work. This will take you from a clean Git checkout where you have your program, modules in lib, a binary in bin that does, you know, my app new with options run and nothing else, and, you know, whatever tests and readme and whatever you want, but no generated stuff. If you run this, it will go, it will get CPM, it will make sure that your app actually compiles with what's there, it will make the Fatpack of it, it'll save it, and you can commit that into your repo, and then anyone in the future can just check out your repo, run your program, there it is. Or if you want to take the Fatpack file and deliver it somewhere else, you can do that as well. It is like no thinking required, no effort. Anyone who wants to develop your code can just check it out, and if they edit something and they want to do a new build and make sure it works, they just do /fatpack, good to go, prove that it works. This is an example of something that I have publicly on the internet that that opened in the wrong monitor, 1 second. It varies.
But for that example where you've got like a no-line program, basically.
Right. Well, I mean, so the program is all in the libraries, so to speak. Sorry, I'm trying to find my mouse cursor and not having a very good time of it. Has anyone seen my cursor? I found it. So this is a real life program, and what does it say? 163K. So I mean, it depends entirely on how much sort of dependencies you have. This uses Osprey and very little else. This is what the thing looks like. This is, you know, my actual code here at the end. All of the dependencies in there. It's not bad, and it works, and anyone can use it.
And it runs entirely in place, so it doesn't unzip itself to somewhere.
Correct. It doesn't need a temporary directory. It doesn't need anything. The question was, it runs entirely in place. Yes, there's no temporary directory like PAR uses, which can cause some problems. Okay, so moving forward. A couple thoughts of things that I have not addressed in this talk. One of them is, what do we do about Windows? I said in the beginning, basically, you know, if you have a Unix system, you can probably count on it having Perl. If you have a Windows system, you can probably count on it not having Perl. Well, Windows users are more friendly to installers. So one thing that you can do is bundle your application with an installer. If you want to go to that effort, say, OK, install Active Perl or Strawberry Perl for me. And then, you know, just bundle your Fatpack into that, and they'll be able to run it that way. Another option is, I mentioned PAR has an executable, not really compiler, but it can make native executables for different platforms. And as I also said, PAR can be a little bit flaky, but what if you feed PAR an already Fatpacked file so that it doesn't actually have to resolve dependencies? You don't have to deal with this stuff that, I don't know if that's actually a good idea or not. I haven't tried it, but it may work. Just take your Fatpack, use FatPacker to output a Windows executable, and send somebody that. It's not too crazy of an idea. Another question is, well, what do we do about GUIs, right? Because cross-platform GUI is already, cross-platform GUI without needing any native libraries, that sounds pretty much impossible to me. Well, everything is web these days, right? And there's pure Perl web frameworks, there's pure Perl HTTP servers. So write your app as a web API, stick whatever kind of, you know, React, Angular, whatever kind of fancy GUI that you want on that, and expose it that way. Try to figure out the best you can how to open a browser on the on the user's system to localhost, and open your application up that way. Bam, you've given them a GUI. It's not pretty, it's not seamless, but it's something that you may be able to use. Just you know, a thought to chew on. Thank you very much for having me here. Are there any other questions? All right, catch me around if you want to talk about it.